Ladies and gentlemen, it is you know what? I'm going to leave this in. It's episode 62. One does not simply miss a single episode of Convince Me. Welcome in, everybody. History has been made. That was my single worst intro in the history of this show. 62 episodes. That one ranks 62nd. Welcome into another episode of Convince Me. I am Andy Rutherford, joined as always by Mr. Brian Bennett, Mr. Casey Elrod. Gentlemen, how goes it?
One ring to rule them all, and to rule Bennett tonight. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
No, I don't think you should sell yourself short. That's definitely probably not 62nd. It might be 61st. I'm going to say 62nd was the Tiger King intro we had. But hello, all you cool cats and kittens.
That feels
Was
like
that
an
our very
eternity
first
ago.
episode?
It was the very first episode.
Bennett with the callback.
Feels like an
you guys-
eternity ago.
It was.
Yeah, we've come a long way to have not gone that far. Welcome into another episode, guys and gals. This is Convince Me, and this week we're going medieval on you. And what I mean by that, I'll get to in just a second. Before we get into that, I'll try to be brief. Our weekly shill. Make sure you're following us on all the socials, facebook.com/Convince Me Show. Twitter, we are at Convince Me Show. Instagram, we are Convince Me Show there as well. And then on YouTube, we can be found at tinyurl.com/Convince Me Show. Make sure you guys are following us on all those pages. Like us, subscribe us, whatever that platform calls for. And of course, we are a podcast dropping most weeks on Wednesday. Sometimes it gets pushed back a week. But make sure wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, go hit us a like, a review, a subscription, whatever it is. And if we're not where you listen to your favorite podcast, let us know. We'll do what we can to get there. So, gentlemen, this week we're going back to a little bit more of a traditional format. I felt we didn't need to stray too far from it. Simple head-to-head show this week. Simple head-to-head show with a very, very large head and a hairless head going at it here. Bennett versus Elrod. And we're going medieval. We're going medieval on you this week, and we're looking at two, I guess we could call them franchises. Technically, one's a movie series, one's a television series. Lord of the Rings versus Game of Thrones, with Mr. Elrod having the ring to rule them all, and Mr. Bennett trying to find out who the true heir to the throne is. So, gentlemen, are you excited about this one?
Well, I'm excited. I'm pumped for this one. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. Very long time.
I feel pretty good about this one, honestly.
I wouldn't.
We'll see.
All right, guys. Well, anybody watching, listening to this show, if you're a fan of either one of these, knows if you're going to watch them, there's some time that's got to be put into that. So I hope you gentlemen have your pen and paper, because we're doing our tiebreaker live.
Better not be math.
It's numbers. It's
Oh.
always numbers with me. Here's what it is. You see, in the last 2 days, I've been in the interest of fairness, because there was some recency bias, because I had seen Game of Thrones within the last couple of years. I hadn't seen The Lord of the Rings in the last few years. So over the last couple of days, I have went back and watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because I'm a good host and prepared for this show. And that took up 2 days. I watched the extended version, all 3 movies, took out good chunks of my days, both today and yesterday. But if one wanted to sit down and watch the 3 extended versions of Lord of the Rings and follow that up with the entire series of Game of Thrones, tell me how long it would take that person in seconds.
Ah.
10 seconds.
How long in seconds it would take to get through both of those series, closest without going over, unless you both go over, and then it's just closest.
Hang on, this is gonna take a long time for me. Uh-oh. Hang on.
Seconds, in seconds, is that what you said?
In seconds.
Oh gosh. I'm just gonna write down a number because I don't really know. Okay, I'm ready.
Hang on, nope, I'm not ready yet.
Oh, actually,
I didn't think that's close.
Actually, I think I screwed up. I did screw up. So we're not adding Game of Thrones to this. This is just the Lord of the Rings extended series.
Oh,
Extended.
Just the Lord of the Rings in seconds?
Yes, the 3 movies in seconds, because I did something wrong here, and I'm trying to figure out what that is. What did I do wrong?
screwed it up.
I did screw it up. You know what? Sorry, guys. This is my fault.
I got it.
I don't know what the right answer is. So
Okay, I'm ready. I got a number.
I did my math wrong. Just looking at this here.
Rod has stumped himself.
I have. I could have just went with it, and you all would not have known the difference had I just went with it.
Like 21,000.
No, they're not even close.
Oh, I better not say mine then.
What I had was 128,000, and I left
Oh.
out half of Game of Thrones.
Ooh.
So
I'll let Bennett go first.
Okay. Well, what if Bennett don't want to go first?
Well, I will let him decide. How about that?
Okay, Bennett, you won somehow.
Yeah.
This show is not going well so far.
No, it's not. Not so good.
Well, me winning should be the theme of tonight, so we'll go with it.
All right.
Right. I want to usually whenever I start off this is like our old school format, and I usually take us way back. But since we're already back in the medieval times, I don't have to take us back. We're already back. So what I usually do if we're already way back is I start off with a question. So I'm going to start off with a question for you. Rhett, do you like excitement?
I'm a fan.
Do you like suspense?
I'd say so.
Do you like brilliant storytelling of fantasy worlds with good guys, bad guys? Sometimes you can't tell who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. The bad guy turns out to be a good guy. Chock full of violence and nudity, betrayal, and even dragons.
Yeah,
That sound interesting?
I'm a fan of pro wrestling. Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. I already knew that. What about this? Do you like fairy tale endings where everyone lives happily ever after?
I mean, no, it's kind of hokey.
Good, because you're not going to find that here.
No, you're not.
What you've got is simply the greatest and most successful series of all time. It was a huge smash hit for HBO. It had record viewership. It received high praise for its complex storytelling and its great characters. There's a ton of them. And won several awards, 59 Emmy Awards to be exact. If you look on best of blank, best of TV series, best of whatever, it's always towards or at the very top. So, and it's also spent its place in pop culture. You've got, people that refer to the Iron Throne for everything. You've got Tom Brady sitting on the Iron Throne, Barack Obama sitting on the Iron Throne. You've got names like Khaleesi and Arya that just surged up the list of baby names back in the 2010s to 2020, maybe even still today. What you get is truly unique. What Game of Thrones did, I've never really seen anything quite like it on TV. But tonight we're going to talk about what makes it so good, and I think you'll agree with me by the time the show's over that Game of Thrones is a better series than Lord of the Rings.
Interesting fact, as viewers of this show know, since we started the show, I had a child, baby boy. He's 8 years old. He's 8 months old, pain in my butt already.
They grow up
But
fast.
had he been a girl, the name was on the table, and I was pushing for Arya. So that goes to your point. Elrod, opening statement.
Right. Like many people about 2 years ago that really hadn't watched each episode as they went on HBO, I binged all, 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. Did that in the 2 months leading up to the finale. And I loved it. I was hooked. Besides 24, which Brett knows, I'm a big 24 fan. I didn't think any show would ever come close to that as far as my liking, but Game of Thrones did. But there's a but to this. What killed Game of Thrones for me, and what killed it for 1,847,590 people that have signed on to the petition, is the last season of Game of Thrones ruined the entire season for me and ruined the entire show for me on the whole. And I'm not unique in that boat. It ruined it for a big segment of the population. So here's how I come to this. Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, very similar shows in terms of the motives, in terms of dragons, in terms of swords and wizards. Here's where Game of Thrones is superior, or here's where Lord of the Rings is superior to Game of Thrones. The storytelling, the way it's shot, the ending. Bennett hates the ending to Lord of the Rings. It's what stories, it's how they're supposed to be told. You're not supposed to build up a character for 8 seasons like they did the Dragon Queen and basically have her murder everybody in the last season and kill that character. And that's what they did. They killed her character. They killed the ending to the show. As you can see with Lord of the Rings, the buildup, each movie gets better. Each movie gets better. The critics and the people that have watched this movie both agree, which it's hard to find any common ground with critics and the people watching the movie. And they did. So as we will see tonight, Lord of the Rings got better, Game of Thrones got worse. The money, what it's done in terms of the fantasy drama, in terms of fantasy dramas in our lifetime, you look at 3 Game of Thrones on the television screen, Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter on the big screen. That's the 3 fantasy shows and movies that have stood the test of time. But tonight, I'm going to tell you why Lord of the Rings is superior to even Harry Potter and Game of Thrones.
Well, judging by me being a judge and me being biased, it would not stand up against Harry Potter, but that's just me. It's not arguing Harry Potter. Interesting opening arguments, gentlemen. I am looking forward to getting deep into this argument, and that is exactly what we're going to do right after this. Guys, stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys and gals. We've heard the opening statements. It's Game of Thrones. It's Lord of the Rings. Let's get into our subtopics. And I'm going to start with you, Elrod. If you will look at your format, The very first one in capital letters says brief. Give me a brief 2-minute synopsis of the plot of Lord
Oh
of the
Lord,
Rings.
you're asking for an impossible task, but I will try my best. In a nutshell, Lord of the Rings is based on a book by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's a 3 movie series. The basic plot is it's set in a fictional world of Middle Earth. The very first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, follows Frodo Baggins from the Shire, and he has a ring that he has to take to a place called Mordor, and destroy into this lake of fire. And the whole essence, the backstory about the ring is you had a dark Lord Sauron thousands of years ago forged this ring. He gave other rings to men, to elves, to other people, and this ring controls basically everyone. This one ring. So there's another 3 series movie set called The Hobbit that follows how Bilbo Baggins obtains the ring. So now you've got Frodo. He has to take the ring and journey across the Shire and other parts of this Middle Earth to destroy this in this lake of fire. And along the way, he has a cast of characters. He has a wizard named Gandalf that helps him out on the journey. He has his trusty sidekick, Samwise, which I will describe here in a few minutes. He encounters dragons along the way. He encounters a creature called Gollum, that very creepy looking character, Schmeagol. He encounters elves, dwarfs, other people, Aragon, an American style guy that I will talk about later on. So the entire movie series is built around Frodo and his journey, but you've got other side plots that develop alongside that story. So in essence, all 3 movies were shot at the same time, the same budget, and that's one of the reasons why all the movies are consistent. They were shot at the same time, and it's not like the 3rd movie was so much better than the first. It follows this journey, short time span, and it is a very good story. Plot twist for people that haven't watched, or maybe spoiler alert: the ring is destroyed in the lake of fire in Mordor, and that's pretty much it. Sorry if I've spoiled anything if you haven't watched the movie in 20 years.
You guys ever heard of Gandalf?
I said Gandalf.
I know. That's a joke. Bennett had to step away as I was telling the joke, so that kind of killed the joke. That was strange. Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know how well of a job you did with 2 minutes there, but I don't know how well of a job you could have done.
I know. It would have been difficult. Talk about the battles that they fought along the way, and then you've got the subplot of Aragon trying to be the ruler of the 2 kingdoms, and it's a very hard task to weld all that in 2 minutes. But the book Lord of the Rings, it was basically Frodo's journey. So the difference between the books and the movies is really they tried to superimpose the subplot of Aragon taking over everything. That's in the book, but the biggest difference between Peter Jackson's movie set and Tolkien's book is Frodo is the primary character in the book, and Jackson wanted to spice it up and have this American hero subplot with Aragon in the movie.
Gotcha. All right, guys and gals, Bennett had to step away for a second, so we're going to step away for a rare second break in the show, but afterwards, we will be right back. Welcome back again, coming out of our second break of the show, record-breaking show, worst intro ever, and our first 2 break show. Bennett, again, capital letters, brief. synopsis of Game of Thrones. Your clock begins now.
Oh yeah, like Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones. It's also based off the book series by author George R. Martin. I think probably the easiest and probably the most simplified answer without giving away too much of the story for people that have been living under a rock and haven't watched Game of Thrones would be one sentence: conquer or die. Basically, Game of Thrones is a story of a struggle to gain power and control. And that control is that of the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms in the fictional land of Westeros. But along this journey to reach the Iron Throne and to rule the entire land, there are more twists and turns than the Tennessee Tornado roller coaster at Dollywood. So, who exactly is trying to take control of all these lands? Really, there's too many to name, but it does involve several noble families, such as the Starks, the Lannisters, the Baratheons, and the Targaryens, among many others as well. And if that wasn't enough conflict, add in this ancient frozen army of the dead that's coming back to wipe all of them out. Then also, you can't really forget about the wildlings as well. And what's really unique about this is there's several plot lines going on simultaneously at the same time. So really, it's a tale of kill or be killed. Really, story of loyalty and deceit. It's about war, lots of violence, lots of nudity and sexual content, and lots of death. Now, Rut, you're an avid wrestling fan, so I'm going to put it to you like this: Game of Thrones is basically a no holds barred match. Falls count anywhere. Everything is on the line for the title, and the title is the Iron Throne.
I like that analogy. We got so many people going after it. It feels like a big Royal Rumble with weapons involved. It's like 2001 all over again. I like it. All right. Sticking with you, Bennett, as we move into our next point here, and I'll give you all 3 minutes on this one, as 2 minutes for the synopsis wasn't fair. 2 minutes for this one would be vastly unfair. To be honest, 3 minutes is probably unfair, but we don't want this show to go 6 hours. So what we're going to do, I want you to tell me about the characters, the good, the bad, the ugly. I know in 3 minutes you can't hit everybody that appears in this show or these movies, but the high points, your main protagonists, your main antagonists, any very interesting sub characters, so to speak. So 3 minutes. Bennett, we'll start with you, and your clock starts now.
Okay, this is going to be almost impossible because there's over 500 characters that make an appearance just in the show, and that's not counting the extras. But that's really nothing compared to the book series, which has over 2,100 characters that have been named. So really, I'm not even going to touch the top 1% of characters here in this really lengthy list. So here goes. I would say my main characters from the TV series are as follows. There may be some spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it, you might want to skip this part. First, I'm going to talk about the Stark family. You know, that's kind of what it's all centered around mostly. You've got Ned Stark, who's the Lord of Winterfell, the Warden of the North, and the right hand of the king. He's an honorable man, father of the Stark house. I thought this guy was going to be the main dude, and I was wrong. Uh, you've got Catelyn Stark. She's the Lady of Winterfell, wife of Lord Stark. She does what all moms do. She tries to take care of her kids and looks out for her babies. You've got Jon Snow. He's the bastard son of Ned Stark. He joins the Night Watch. He leads the defense against the wildling attacks and is appointed King of the North. He links up and eventually hooks up with Daenerys, and fight against the White Walkers. Then he discovers that he is through blood. He is the heir of the Iron Throne, and that Khaleesi is actually his aunt. So that's pretty crazy. Some of the kids, you've got Sansa Stark. She's the second child. She was initially betrothed to King Joffrey, but was later released. She got smuggled back into Winterfell and was forced to marry Ramsay Bolton, who's not really a very good dude. But she later escapes, holds the fort down while Jon Snow leads the fight, and she's eventually crowned queen of the independent North. Arya Stark, the younger daughter of the Starks. She kind of gets captured and escapes a few times. She's taught the art form of water dancing, which is sword fighting. She becomes faceless, but then kind of backs out of it. But then it comes back. It comes back to be handy for her in the end. And she probably gets my vote for most improved character as the series rolls along. And then you have Bran Stark. He's the fourth child. He kind of saw something he wasn't supposed to see, and for that, he got left paralyzed from the waist down. He finds this three-eyed raven in his dreams and sets out and eventually finds what he's looking for to become the next third-eyed raven. He has powers to see into the future and the past and becomes pretty powerful in the end. For the House Baratheon, you've got Robert Baratheon, who was the king of the Seven Kingdoms. He was once a fierce warrior. Then he got old and fat and miserable. He's probably the most chill dude in all of Westeros. You've got his son, Joffrey, who was the crown prince. He's Cersei Lannister's oldest child and heir to the throne. He's not really aware, but King Robert Baratheon's not really his real father. If you follow the show, you know who his real dad is. He's not a good dude at all. He was a coward. He was cruel. He was pretty much his mom's little puppet, though. In the Lannister family, you've got Cersei. She was of House Baratheon and House Lannister, Queen of Westeros, and the wife of Robert. She had 3 children. One of those was Joffrey. She's not really to be messed with. She's got a strong desire for power, and she'll take out whoever she needs to get that power. She's got a twin brother whom she has an incestuous relationship with. And that twin brother would be Jaime Lannister, member of the King's Guard. He's named Kingslayer for killing the previous king. Like I said, he had a thing going on with his sister his whole life. He's a really skilled swordsman, but was taken down a notch there when his sword hand kind of got whacked off there. This is a guy that I kind of disliked at first, but he kind of grew on me as the show went on, really. And then probably one of the more popular guys in the whole series is Tyrion, the imp, younger brother of the twins. He's a dwarf, but don't let that fool you. He's super smart, he's super cunning. He's crafty, he loves the women. I don't know, but he just kind of finds a way to survive pretty much through all odds throughout the whole series. Kind of speed this up, I'm way over on my time. You've got Khaleesi, Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, the exiled princess of the Targaryen dynasty. She was once married to a powerful warlord, Khal Drogo, in exchange for an army for her abusive brother. But once he dies, she gets these, I guess they're like stone eggs that become dragons. And these 3 dragons give her the means to conquer and rule with a large army. So she sets her eyes off for the Iron Throne herself. She thinks she's the rightful heir to the throne. A few honorable mentions would be Robb Stark, Theon Greyjoy, the Hound, Peter Baelish, Sam Tarly, Stannis Baratheon, Bronn, Varys, Shay, Marjorie Tyrell, Brienne, and Ramsay Bolton, and probably the Night King as well. Sorry that was so long.
It's close to 3 minutes.
That was as short as I could get.
I gotta say, and you still only scratched the surface.
Yeah,
Oddly
that was
enough.
less than 1% of the cast.
I will say between these two, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, my favorite character out of the entirety of both of them is on Game of Thrones. And it's Tyrion Lannister.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
And in a close second for me, probably Braun. I was
Yeah.
a big fan of Braun. Was a fan of the Hound towards the end.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Hold on, but before I start, trivia question for both of you. What is the common denominator between character-wise between Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings? This is easy.
See this week's graphic for more details.
Yeah.
Sean Bean, Ned Stark, and also Boromir. And he both dies. He both dies.
Just stop where you are. There are going to be follow-up questions for the show.
Okay.
Just let's move along here. Elrod, you have 3 minutes that will be just as strictly enforced on you as they were on Bennett.
I was under 3 minutes.
Characters of Lord of the Rings, and go.
Well, I consider the main character between the three movies to be Frodo. He's the one carrying the ring to Mordor from the Shire. Along the way, he has a fellowship of the Ring. He has Gandalf, his trusty wizard. He's the first leader of the fellowship, and he's one of the possessors of one of the elf rings. He dies in quotation marks in the first movie, but comes back as Gandalf the White. He was Gandalf the Grey at the start. Bilbo makes an appearance in the first movie. If you watch the earlier movies that deal with Lord of the Rings, it's the Hobbit series, and that is all about him. Frodo's sidekick is Samwise. He is his gardener and his dear friend. You've got Aragorn, who is. What would you say?
I said it's Rudy.
Rudy, yes, Rudy, yes.
Continue.
You have Aragorn, who is a descendant of the original human king who was too weak to destroy the Ring of Power thousands of years before. So he has his turn at the very end to even up the odds. Aragorn's probably my second or third favorite character in the series. You also have Legolas, the king of the elves of the northern Mirkwood. Archer, he never misses. He is in the fellowship. You also have one of my favorite characters, the dwarf, Gimli. He is he carries around his deadly axe. He's very short. You have two of Frodo's companions from the Shire. You've got Merry and Pippin, who ride on the shoulders of the trees in the Two Towers. You have Rut's girlfriend, whose name escapes me right now. The elf. Yes, Arwen. You have her. You have the elves. So you've got a mixture of humans, of dwarfs, of elves. Elves are probably the most powerful beings in the show. The archers, they live forever, it seems like. In terms of the bad guys, what I've described up to this point are the good guys. The antagonists in the show are really three different people. You've got, of course, Sauron, who has the Ring of Power, and it's about his quest to get it back to eliminate the humans, eliminate all of his perceived threats. You've got the orcs, which are beings that he creates to do his bidding for him. And you've got Saruman, who is Gandalf's mentor. He's the leader of his order, and he is a good guy for the first, I would say, about an hour and a half of the first movie, and then he turns heel. He goes Hogan at the Bash of the Beach or whatever that thing. He goes totally heel and he turns on Gandalf and he sides with Sauron because he perceives that he will ultimately win. So he does the heel turn. It does not end well for him in the second movie. In the Two Towers, his towers get knocked down by a bunch of walking trees, which are more characters in this series. Three antagonists. You got Sauron, and the orcs, in addition to who are in the Fellowship, carrying the ring to Mordor.
The orcs, the dude from the Goonie would have been a great orc, I do believe. If you want to talk about Arwen, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people that when they look at the females of these two franchises, they're going to look at Khaleesi on Game of Thrones, and she's a very attractive lady. I can't think of her actual name right now. Bennett, do you have it handy? What?
Was it Emily Clark?
Yeah, Emily Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very attractive lady, but Lord of the Rings takes this one. I mean, Liv Tyler. If you, to anybody out there that disagrees with that statement, that Liv Tyler is the most attractive woman in both of these shows, I dare you go watch the Aerosmith Crazy video and then come back and tell me I'm wrong, because I'm not. But it's also kind of weird because that's Steven Tyler's daughter. But anyway, back to the show. Moving right along here, going back 2 minutes. Elrod, you said people love this show. You said critics love this show. Tell me in 2 minutes about the critical and the public reception for Lord of the Rings.
Well, I mean, Lord of the Rings, just these three movies, not The Hobbit, which they also have their own acclaim, but the Lord of the Rings three movies, The Fellowship, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, are all widely regarded as some of the greatest and most influential movies ever made. If you look at what they yielded at the box office, between the three of them, almost $3 billion in worldwide receipts. Usually when you have a trilogy, you may have a strong first movie. The second movie may be good, but there's always a tailing off, like in the third movie, like The Godfather, for instance. This film series only got better with each movie, which is unheard of. For example, Return of the King had over, I think it had 17 Academy Awards. It swept every one of its awards. In a total, 30 Academy Award nominations between the three movies, with the last movie, Return of the King, sweeping all 17 awards, which broke a record. The first movie also yielded some Academy Awards, mainly for sound and cinematography. All three of these movies, they were filmed at the same time, so they have the same sound and the way it's shot. Each movie, the critics loved it. People loved it. $3 billion at the box office. Later on a side note, the prequel also yielded $3 billion at the box office. So this was a huge financial success and also a huge success in terms of awards. Kevin Turin, the LA Times movie writer, says this trilogy will not soon, if ever, find an equal in terms of how it improved over the three movies and its financial success too. The characters in the movies, at least 5 of them are on the 100 greatest movie characters of all time. And the people that play these roles, Ian McKellen, Ian Holm, folks like this, these are great actors in this movie as well. Rudy, for instance, great actors. It's going to be a long time before you see a movie franchise like Lord of the Rings where you get better as each movie goes on. And that's the key takeaway in terms of the public's perception, also the critical perception as well.
Bennett, same to you. 2 minutes, critical and public reception of Game of Thrones.
It received critical acclaim. You can do a basic search on Rotten Tomatoes and just see just how well Game of Thrones has fared from a critical standpoint. First season scored a respectful 90%, but then it only went up from there. The following seasons went 96%, 96%, 97%, 93%, 94%, and 93%. Some critics and publications have even called the show among the best HBO series of all time. It's been praised for its great storytelling, vast array of really unique characters. Entertainment Weekly praised its vivid, vital, and just plain fun storytelling. And according to the Hollywood Reporter, the series made a strong case for being one of TV's best series ever. Season 3, which is often regarded as one of the peaks of the entire series, TV Guide named the season's episode "The Reigns of Castamere" as number 3 on their best 65 episodes of the 21st century. Of course, we know this as the Red Wedding episode. It's widely regarded as one of the most unforgettable episodes in TV history. As far as public reception, for HBO, it was a huge rating success throughout all 8 seasons. The first season averaged just 2.5 million viewers per episode, which is still really good. But for its second season, the series had an average gross audience of 11.6. Then it shot up to 14.2 for the third season, making Game of Thrones the second most viewed HBO series after The Sopranos. By the fifth season, it was simulcasted in 173 countries and became the largest TV drama telecast, according to Guinness Book of World Records. Sixth season, average per episode gross viewing figure had increased up to 25 million. And by season 7, the average viewer numbers had grown to 32.8 million per episode. So it went from 2.5 million at the very beginning to up to 32 million per episode by season 7. And the series finale in the season 8 was viewed by 19.3 million people across HBO's platforms, becoming the network's most watched episode. And what I found really impressive was that as of 2013, about 58% of the series viewers were male and 42% were female, which shows a pretty close between the two sexes there. I was surprised that it was that close. Of course, Game of Thrones has many fans, including political leaders like former U.S. President Barack Obama. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier too, by 2013, the name Arya was the fastest rising girl's name in U.S. And as recently as 2019, country music artist Taylor Swift told Entertainment Weekly that several songs on her 2017 album Reputation were actually inspired by Game of Thrones characters and plots. So, I mean, Game of Thrones has a strong presence among, everywhere in pop culture. And, it's obvious that public loved it too. You've seen numbers go from 2.5 million per episode all the way to over 30 million per episode. So pretty good for old Game of Thrones.
Not too shabby at all. So here's where we stand right now, gentlemen. And I tell you this to tell you something else. But, when we look at the synopsis, we look at the characters, both of them, great plots, great characters, kind of hard to distinguish there. Really, when we look at the perceptions, both critics and the public, both of these really killed it. People love both of these, and it's really hard sometimes to compare a TV series to a movie trilogy. Like, it's very impressive numbers of what Lord of the Rings did at the box office and what they did at the Oscars. The Game of Thrones, can't win Oscars. because they're a TV show. And obviously there's no box office numbers, but what they did as far as viewership is just killer. There's really not a lot to separate these two through our first 3 points. But these next 2 points are something that we can't really define by numbers. And really, where I am right now, I'm split right down the middle. So these next 2 topics that we have here on our format are going to be critical to your success or your failure in your venture for the throne of this episode, so to speak. So Bennett, we're going to stay with you. 2 minutes on the clock. Both of these are similar in that they're kind of medieval settings in a fantasy world with fantasy beings, a lot of battles, quest for power, that sort of thing. And there are these 2, and then there are a lot of other shows and movies that fall into this kind of fantasy genre. So for the next 2 minutes, tell me what sets Game of Thrones apart from all those others, including Lord of the Rings, in this genre.
I think the main thing that sets Game of Thrones apart from not only Lord of the Rings, but most movies, television shows, books, whatever you want to name it, is that Game of Thrones doesn't really follow your typical blueprint for how a show is supposed to be ran. What I mean by that is in Game of Thrones, the good guy doesn't always win. It doesn't always go the way that the viewer hopes it's going to go. The show paints a very, very vivid picture of just how ruthless the quest for power can be. And you never really knew what was going to happen next. I learned personally very quickly not to get overly attached to characters, no matter their status in the show. Game of Thrones is not really afraid to push the envelope, whether that be like extreme violence, going all out to achieve shock value like they did with the Red Wedding, over the top nudity and pervasive sexual themes. And then you've got the multiple complex plots that are all going on at the same time, yet you're still able to keep up with each one of them. Whenever the opening credits would start each episode, you knew you were about to go on some sort of emotional ride. You didn't know if you were going to be happy during that episode, if you were going to be upset during that episode, or if your mind was going to be just absolutely completely blown by the time the closing credits played. And most of the time it was that of the latter.
Elrod, same question, 2 minutes. What sets Lord of the Rings apart from everybody else in the genre?
You know, that's a good question. Yeah, when I was looking back at the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, and I can't believe it's been 20 years now since the first one came out, but it's 20th anniversary of the Fellowship. And one thing that is still surprising to me is how well the graphics hold up even today. The CGI in that movie was way ahead of its time. And it's still credited today. If you could take that movie and release it today and not do any touch up, it would hold up against any other movie. And that's what a lot of the critics, a lot of folks say that sets this series apart from any other fantasy movie, is the ability for Peter Jackson back in that day to make a 3-part series. Really, each movie had a $75 million budget, which in terms of today's money is nothing. Movies are spending $200 million now on development. But back then, for the product that he created for each of these movies, with the visuals, with the battle scenes, which I'll talk about here in a minute, it is unbelievable, the work that Peter Jackson, this was Peter Jackson's baby for 20 years. He had the rights to the movie. He shopped around Harvey Weinstein at Miramax. He fell into New Line Cinema, who developed all 3 movies. They made the right choice, by the way, and given Peter Jackson anything he wanted. but just the pure epic that Peter Jackson was able to produce with these three movies, along with The Hobbit, the 6-part movie series that he made. And there's no movie that got below 90% with the critics or with people at the box office. And that is very hard to do, to have a 6-part movie series where everybody seems to be content. And not to mention, Amazon has the rights to a television show, which they're going to develop kind of like Game of Thrones. It is going to be the most expensive television project ever made. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars just to develop one season. And I'm very excited to see what Peter Jackson's folks do with this upcoming television series, to see if the graphics hold up and to see what surprises he has in store for us.
Very, very interesting. All right. Our last topic that you all had to prepare for. When you think of both of these, when you think of Game of Thrones, you think of Lord of the Rings. When somebody mentions the name of that franchise, certain scenes come to mind, certain images, things that those moments in those movies or in that television show that even years later you can look back on and you remember that scene. So, Elrod, I know what I have listed here is best scene. I know you kind of spilled the beans to us before we started recording. You might have more than one, but you have 2 minutes. So you better squeeze it in there. That time starts now.
I'll squeeze it in. I have a scene from each movie, actually. I really can't choose between each of these three, but the first one I'll start off with is the second one. And the whole plot of the second movie, The Two Towers, is there's a big battle that's brewing. They're all the humans, all the elves, that they're amassed in Helm's Deep. The final battle scene at Helm's Deep is unlike any battle scene up into that point in American cinema that we've ever had. The complexity, just how it puts you on edge, and seeing that battle take place in Helm's Deep with the orcs, with the humans, it's something else. The second movie scene I'll talk about is The Return of the King, the last battle scene where Rohan shows up and helps the humans out after, and Aragon out after basically thumbing their nose at them the entire time. And the CGI and the horses that Peter Jackson was able to portray in that is something else. And it really has a bow on that last movie. But I guess the most iconic scene from the three original Lord of the Rings movies is the scene from the first one, where you have Gandalf that's trying to hold off the dragon and have the Fellowship escape out the back door. But you have the scene where he tells the dragon, "You shall not pass," and that is probably my most iconic scene from all three movies, and that's what led to his death. And then he's resurrected from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. So those three scenes really tie a bow around the first three movies, and it's hard to pick between those three what my favorite one is, but it's probably Gandalf holding back the dragon.
You know, all these movie scenes that you keep talking about with Lord of the Rings, I just keep thinking about that South Park episode that they kind of take the Lord of the Rings blueprint. You've got Jimmy. It's like, "You shall not." Oh man.
Oh me.
About South Park, man.
And pretty
What a
much
show.
everything you just mentioned, there's a meme associated with it now.
There is.
Yeah.
Which
One does not simply.
You shall not pass. All right. Speaking of meme-worthy scenes, there are a few of those. Game of Thrones as well. Bennett, tell me the best scene or scenes that you can in 2 minutes for Game of Thrones.
I had a lot of trouble coming up with one scene. and there's no way I can get multiple scenes out of this. I'm going to do good to get one scene done in 2 minutes. But the one scene that I decided on was Arya kills a Night King, which is in season 8. The episode is known as The Long Night. It's probably my favorite episode in the whole entire series. It takes place at Winterfell and depicts the final battle between the army of the dead and the combined armies of the living. So this is great because you have throughout the first 7 or 8 seasons, all the living are fighting against each other. Then they all have to work together because here comes, the White Walkers. So that's pretty cool in of itself. One cool element. The castle walls come down. The White Walkers are pouring in. Jon Snow attempts to charge at the Night King to be the hero, but he's forced to leave because, the Night King, he reanimates the dead. Here they all come. Theon Greyjoy defends Bran as right to the very end there, but they get surrounded by the Night King and all the White Walkers. So Bran thanks Theon for everything that he's done. Theon charges at the Night King, who just completely wipes out Theon. Night King approaches Bran, is drawing his sword when Arya comes out of nowhere and leaps up with the Valyrian steel dagger and goes to get him, but he catches her by the throat, and with her the hand that she wields her dagger in, and it looks like that's the end of the line for Arya, but she drops the dagger into her other hand and stabs him, which has caused the army of the dead to disintegrate. It's really cool. What's best about this though is that one scene was basically 8 seasons in the making. And a matter of fact, Game of Thrones spent 3 years foreshadowing just that one scene. The showrunners, David Ben-Eoff, I probably butchered that, and D.B. Weiss explained that they knew since about season 6 that this is how they wanted it to go. They wanted Arya to do it, and they kind of sprinkled in little clues that we all missed completely along the way. They did a lot of foreshadowing, which I thought I give them a lot of props to that. There's foreshadowing throughout the whole thing if you go back and watch all the little clues that we missed. The biggest foreshadowing happened in season 7. She reunites with Bran under that tree, and that is the exact spot where she ends up killing the Night King later. And he hands her that dagger, which was once used in an assassination attempt against him. And he told her, "I don't want it." He said, "It's wasted on a cripple." And in that scene, he reveals that he has a lot of intel on what Arya is going to do because, he has the ability to look into the future. So he knows what's going to happen, but he can't give it away. And so he just has to prepare her for it. It becomes significant in her arsenal. First, she spars with Brienne, and then once she finally gets up to her level where they're evenly matched, Brienne knocks her sword out, her needle, her sword called Needle, out of her hand. And a 1-2 swap of moves, she draws her dagger in a position where she can stalemate Brienne, which it's the same move that she did on the Night King. So there was a whole lot of foreshadowing just on that part, which made it just even more cooler, I thought.
Very, very much so. Moving on, follow-up questions. I have 2 that you all are not prepared for. So we'll see how up and ready to defend your side you really are. Bennett, I'm going to start with you. I have 2 for each of you, although it's really 2 questions, but I want both of you to answer it. The first one, obviously we're dealing with a movie series versus a television series. Do you think it would have been better? Do you think it would have made a difference? Do you think it would have been as successful if Game of Thrones were a movie franchise as opposed to a television franchise?
I think so because, every episode was already an hour long, anyways. And I believe their longest running show was, I believe, like 82 minutes. And you have some movies that are, getting close to that in of itself. So for them, if they were to make this into like a series, it wouldn't be no problem for them to kind of cut out Game of Thrones, they do lay a lot of framework, but there's a lot of times too where it kind of gets slow. I think if they made it into 3 movies like Lord of the Rings, they could take out some of that stuff it was important, but you could cut it out to where it's just full action the whole time. I think if you did that, it would be able to stand really well as a action thriller movie. You've already got your nudity. You've got to have nudity. You've got Peter Dinklage in it. Every single movie that he's in is a huge success. So it's fail proof in of itself already. So yeah, I think it would do pretty well actually. That'd actually be an interesting concept to see.
Elrod, in the same vein, flip the script here. Would Lord of the Rings be as successful, the same, better, worse, if it were expanded into a television series as opposed to 3 movies?
Ask me about 10 months and I'll tell you. It's been developed. It's about to, I think it's going to air later this year, maybe first of next year on Amazon Prime. It's the most expensive. They've thrown a kitchen sink at it with the money, with the production that they put it into the show. It's been developed over 2 to 3 years. I don't know. I think I like it as a movie. I mean, I remember watching Return of the King when it came out in the old Cookville Theater. And that was the first movie that I ever watched. There was an intermission. And I don't know. A lot of people do not like. One knock against the movies is that they're so long. Who wants to sit there and watch a movie for 3 hours? But we're going to find out how good it really is, because the television show is coming. So ask me in about 10 months. I'll tell you.
All right. And then my last follow-up question for both of you. One does not simply cast Sean Bean unless you're going to kill him pretty early on in the sequence of things. Sean Bean, fantastic actor. Of course, he played Boromir in Lord of the Rings, and he dies at the end of the first movie. He played Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. He's pretty much a main character. You might even think he's the main character. And then before the first season's over, he's dead there too. So it's really kind of infuriating that they keep killing poor Sean Bean and don't even give him some big dramatic death at the end. It's usually pretty early on in the matter of things. Oh, there he goes. But the character of Boromir versus the character of Ned Stark. Elrod, tell me why Boromir was better, A, and B, why his death that early on maybe was more significant than the early death of Ned Stark.
That's a hard one to do. I mean the whole if you watching both series, watching Game of Thrones, the whole series is based around the Starks. I mean, Lord of the Rings is not based around Boromir. I mean,
but his death and his character still had a lasting impact through all the way through the end of the third movie, even though he wasn't.
It did. I mean, of course, you got Aragorn, who it was revealed is the real heir to throne of the King of the Men. So I don't know. That's a hard argument to make when you've got Game of Thrones and he's the central character. I mean, he was not the central character in any of the movies. You can't make that argument. You just can't do it. So I'm going to concede this point to Bennett.
Well, Bennett, you're going to win, but give me your answer anyway. of why Ned Stark, A, better than Boromir, and B, why his death was so significant.
Well, I don't really remember him in Lord of the Rings. It's been a long time. I remember the little Smeagol guy. That's about it, really. Um, so as far as being better, I'm not sure. I do know that he was critical for that first season because he pretty much carried the series while his family, these characters, his family, they're still those characters still getting developed during the first series. He kind of lays the framework down for the family. You know, he kind of sets the tone too for what Game of Thrones is going to throw at you. Just when you think you've already got the whole series figured out, they throw you this curveball, you know. So in a way, he kind of had to go out so that everybody else, you know, could rise up. You've got Caitlin, who, you know, she protect her kids. You know, she did everything she could to look out in their best interest. Look what it did for Bran, Arya, and Sansa. They were able to go out on their own, and you know, a lot of it too, I think, is from him being taken out. You know, they kind of have that chip on their shoulder, and they go on to do. All three of them go to do huge things. Rob Stark, not so much. I think he dies, but the other Starks, they do great things. You know, so it's kind of like the father laying the framework down for his family in a way.
All right, gentlemen, closing arguments. It's a tight race right now. It could be won or lost right here. Bennett, you went first in opening. I'm going to let you go first in closing. 2 minutes, closing argument. Why Game of Thrones is better than Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep this fairly quick. So I've went long on every one of them. Game of Thrones is hard to condense down. I should get the win just for trying to condense this down as much as I have. Um, Game of Thrones, 59 Emmy Awards, 8 Screen Actors Guild Awards, and a Peabody Award. It holds the record for total Emmy Award wins for a scripted television series, which it actually blew it out of the water with 59. The old record was 37 back in 2004, and also holds the record for the most Emmy nominations for a drama series, 161. That's crazy. I know Elrod and a lot of the naysayers, they're going to knock season 8, but in 2019, which was the show's final season, it established a new record for most Emmy nominations received in a year with 32, which broke a 25-year-old record of 26 nominations, which was by NYPD Blue back in 1994. I don't think it would be a just show if we didn't go to Ranker and talk about Ranker. And Rut likes Ranker. Let's look at Ranker, the official rankings for Convince Me. If you go on Ranker and you type in best TV shows of all time, just simple, best TV shows of all time, Game of Thrones, number 2, behind Breaking Bad, but ahead of Sopranos, Twilight Zone, and The Office. You can kind of narrow it down a little bit. Say best TV shows of the past 20 years, and it becomes number 1. Somehow it jumps Breaking Bad. It's over Stranger Things, The Office, and House. Now, on Ranker still, get on Ranker and type in best movies of all time. Number 1 is Forrest Gump, obviously. It really is. It really is. Get on there right now. If you're listening to this podcast, pause it, go on Ranker. Number 1, best movies, Forrest Gump. You have to scroll way down to number 11 to get your very first Lord of the Rings, and it's Fellowship of the Ring. Right under it is number 12, Return of the King. But me, I prefer Return of the Jedi over Return of the King if I'm watching a movie. And then the Two Towers movies, number 16. So clearly, Game of Thrones has the higher rankings if you take that into consideration. Both of them are great. Both of them are deserving in their own right. They've won a lot of awards. Obviously, they're both great series. But you have to ask yourself this: do you like the predictable? Do you like the played out happy ever after? The good ones always win. Gee Willikers, we've pulled out another win. We're the good guys. Then yeah, go for Lord of the Rings. But if you want mind-blowing plot twists, unpredictability, risque scenes of intimate relations, often pervasive, gore, violence, suspense, great acting and storytelling, and just downright heck of a thrill ride, then you should probably go with Game of Thrones.
Pretty compelling argument there, Elrod.
Mm.
There's Bennett's point. What's your counterpoint? Closing argument, why Lord of the Rings is better than Game of Thrones.
Well, as you can see, Rod, both of these shows are very similar in the motifs and the subject area, subject matter. Here's the difference. The writers of Game of Thrones relied upon the source material of Martin. Well, Martin is still writing the book series. By the time that they got around to season 8, they had to pretty much make it up on their own with a little bit of input from Martin, but the majority of the product was from them. They only had 6 episodes for the last season, and they were rushed. I mean, it's not their fault. It's just with the hand they were dealt. The knock on the last season of Game of Thrones is a couple things. One, it was rushed, but 2 is the character development and what they did and what you saw in the seasons 1 through 7 is not what you got in 8. In terms of the length of time it takes characters to get to point A to point B, it took them a long time in season 1 and season 7. It seems like in 8, they snapped a finger and they were there thousands of miles in a couple seconds. But let's look at season 8 of Game of Thrones. He talked about the Emmy nominations, but let's look at what the people say on Rotten Tomatoes. Season 8 of Game of Thrones has a tomato meter of 55%. When you look at what the audience says about the show, however, it goes down significantly. There's over 14,000 user confirmed ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. The average score of the last season by the people, 30%. So maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe it wasn't the writer's fault that they didn't have the source material from the writer because he just hasn't finished it yet. Or maybe they should have waited until Martin finished his story. But the simple fact is Game of Thrones, as time went on, got worse. You look at what the people say, if you look at what the critics say about Lord of the Rings, it got progressively better with money and with the product. So that is not up for debate. So I would submit this to you, Rod. Lord of the Rings is Mariano Rivera. It's the closer. Game of Thrones, season 8, is Armando Benitez. He can't close it. He gets shelled. 30%. I close my case, and he can give me the win.
You realize Armando Benitez is statistically one of the best regular season closers of all time, correct?
But when it comes time for the big game, season 8, he doesn't bring it. He doesn't bring it in the World Series.
All right. This is close. I'm a big fan of both of these. I'm going to piss off one franchise either way I go here. And I apologize, Elrod. I was listening to your closing arguments. Those on YouTube might have seen that I wasn't looking. My dog decided that while Elrod was talking was a great time to come throw his bowl around in the kitchen and be very loud. Thank goodness for the mute button on Zoom. But anyway, I was listening whilst chastising him. But when we look at these subtopics, like I said, as far as the plot, As far as the characters, can't judge those. They're each individual, and both fantastic. As far as the critical and public reception, both obviously killed it for the majority of their time, and it's hard to compare because you're looking at a movie audience and a TV audience. When we look at what sets it apart, um, I mentioned that I went back over the last couple of days and watched the extended versions of these Game of Thrones, and you can tell that the graphics are 20 years old in some spots, but in other spots you're not going to get any better today. That's fantastic. Now there's a couple of motion spots with Smeagol / Gollum where it looks a little glitchy, but that's just me being picky. As far as Game of Thrones goes, the unpredictability of it definitely sets it apart. The way they kill off main characters. Some people don't like that. I do. It gives you that sense that nobody's safe. And I feel like, just to bring in another television show as a point of reference, another show that I've seen every episode of so far that's still going on, and you want to really talk about falling off towards the end, but The Walking Dead. There's that sense of you got to watch every week because nobody's safe. I like that about it, and Game of Thrones definitely had that. When you look at the best scenes, obviously there's those iconic scenes in Lord of the Rings, Thou Shalt Not Pass, the battle scenes. For me personally, it's a lot of the dialogue during those battle scenes between Gimli and Legolas. That is quite humorous to me, that I remember quite well. And then, of course, Bennett hit the nail on the head. Thought he might have went Red Wedding there with best scene on Game of Thrones, which is iconic. Most people would probably go to that. It is one of the more shocking moments in any television show. But that long night episode of Game of Thrones, probably my favorite episode of any television show ever. Just the unpredictability, the way that show's set up, the way that everybody in that show was involved in that battle. You had this feeling through the whole show of who's going to die, because this show doesn't care to kill off main characters. It's the last season. So you're drawn in the whole time. And then the scene where Arya kills the Nightwalker is just one of those where you're watching it by yourself. It's one of those moments. Just fantastic. And to address kind of Elrod's point, and to kind of counterpoint it, but also agree with you at the same time, as far as the last season of Game of Thrones goes, I didn't hate the last season. The show went 45 minutes too long. If the season had ended where Khaleesi rides off on the dragon, if they had just ended it there, left it open-ended, you don't know who became king, what happened, just leave that up to interpretation, it would have been the greatest show of all time. But then the show went on for 45 more minutes and just pissed everybody off in the way that it went. It was awful. The last 45 minutes. Now, the last season as a whole, I thought was great, except the last 45 minutes of the entire show was just dragged out and not very well received by myself or really anybody else. Went back and watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as I've mentioned the last couple of days. That went 30 minutes too long. The ring is destroyed, the bad guys lose, the good guys win, and then we've got 30 minutes of this crap of them going back to the Shire, of nothing really important happening. And then there's this boat trip that Bilbo's going on and Gandalf's going on, and Frodo's going too, that doesn't matter. It means nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the show. It's not an aha moment. It's a why didn't this end 25 minutes ago moment. So to be fair, they both went about a half an hour too long. But here's my thing. This purely comes down to preference. Whichever one of you loses, you gave a good argument. You both did well. Elrod, you didn't. I don't think you're going to piss off the Lord of the Rings fans like you did the Marvel fans. So kudos to you there. Both great arguments. Both great franchises. Love them both. Comes down to preference. And this is Rut's preference. And I'm the mediator. I decide who wins. Listeners, viewers, if you think it's totally opposite of what I say, then you're right too. It's a matter of opinion. In my opinion, based on the arguments and based on seeing both, my win goes to Game of Thrones. Now that's just me. If you listen to this argument and thought Lord of the Rings won, you're right. I mean, it could go either way. For me, the main selling point is the unpredictableness of it. You look at your main characters of Lord of the Rings, every one of them is still alive at the end, and the good guys won. I like the unpredictableness of no matter how big a star is in the show, no matter what happens, they could die on this episode and then everything changes. You don't see what's coming. It's that unpredictable factor, and it's the fact that it's not always the happy ending. The good guy always wins. The guy we thought was the main protagonist of the show dies like 7 episodes in, gets beheaded. So for me, it's Game of Thrones. If you disagree with me, you're right. If you agree with me, you're right. To me, it purely comes down to preference. I don't think there's any way to judge these two against each other on a fair basis otherwise, other than preference. So Bennett, you've convinced me it's Game of Thrones. Elrod, you convinced other people that it's Lord of the Rings. I'm going to call you both winners, but we don't do that crap here. We actually have a winner. So since we're doing that, I'm going on preference, giving it to Bennett. But both of you, excellent arguments.
Right, we're both winners of life, like the UT Vols.
Brick by brick.
I think this show just went 30 minutes too long.
It probably did. I'm trying to stick with a theme here.
You know, some people will argue Game of Thrones, some people argue Lord of the Rings, but I think we can all agree that Ranker is never wrong.
I mean, that's what sealed the deal. And this is again, preference. Of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, the fact that Fellowship is the highest rated one kind of blows my mind. I thought that was the worst of the 3. That's not a knock against it. It was a great movie, but of the 3, and especially for it to be that far above Two Towers.
On Rotten Tomatoes, the third one's the highest rated.
What's your thoughts on the first 2, Elrod?
Don't dislike them. I think
is Fellowship
they get
better?
it right.
Is Fellowship better?
It's Return of the King, Two Towers, Fellowship.
See, that's the way I am. That's why I was shocked Fellowship was the highest ranked one.
Yeah. So Ranker's not always right. How about that?
I mean, they are when I am arguing. Ranker's always right. And if Ranker does not agree with me, it doesn't make it into my argument.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you put if you're arguing a case in a jury trial, do you put your
next time I have a jury trial, I'm gonna say, jury, Ranker says this, and that's the law. Ranker.
Try it. If you got nothing else, it's worth a shot.
There we go.
It's been working so far.
So, all right, guys, we thank you for joining us this week. Let us know what you think. Am I an idiot? Some of you probably think so, and that's okay. Like I said, some people thought Elrod won the show, and they're right. Some people thought Bennett won the show, and they're right. You're both winners tonight. Elrod, I can't even make fun of your argument other than your whole, I don't know why, and I think Bennett might have been on the same wavelength because he gave me a grin. When you said something about Gandalf, it came off like the have you guys ever heard of Gambit line to me from the Marvel episode. But all right, gentlemen, any parting words?
Feel like not Owen Hart, but Bret Hart in Canada. That's how I feel right now. I'm getting screwed.
I'm feeling pretty comfy up on this Iron Throne right now. Of course, it's always important to get a win, but what's most important is to get a Forrest Gump reference in. But if you can do both in one episode,
I gotta say,
doing well.
that was one of your more creative getting it in there, and I applaud it.
That's what makes this one of my favorite episodes.
I'm here for it, and just the way you got that in there, I'm here for it. Terrible opening to the show. Stumbled over my words in the intro. It was awful. This thing started off terribly, but I think we picked it up. Both of you with great arguments did well. Proud of both of you. And next week I'll get myself back in the arguing chair where I am much more comfortable. Don't know what I'll be arguing, but you're not going to want to miss it. So make sure you're back next week. Again, hit us on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the YouTubes. Once again, tinyurl.com/convincemeshow. Until next week, for Mr. Bennett, for Mr. Elrod, I am Rut, and we'll see you then. Peace.